Hello everyone, it's Jay Gould, founder and host of Behind the Web. Today's guest, we're going to learn how he was the original lean startup, or one of them. He grew his business to $8 million in revenue and ran that business for about 8 years profitably before he finally sold it, reportedly according to TechCrunch for over $20 million, undisclosed. The guest is James Hong, the founder of HOTorNOT, co-founder of HOTorNOT. James, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Nice to be here.
Cool. So why don't you just take me back to like October? I think it was October 2000. I read that you guys co-founded HOTorNOT. Can you tell me about your co-founder and what was the idea at the time?
Oh yeah. Okay. Sure. So my co-founder was a guy named Jim Young that I grew up with. Knew him in high school, and then we went to college together. And post college, he was in grad school, and I was getting my MBA, and we just got together and started talking about different ideas, and we got together and. So one day we were just talking about girls, and he had mentioned that he saw this girl at a party that he thought was a perfect 10, and I didn't see her, so I couldn't really speak to that. But I said, wouldn't it be funny if there was a website where people could rate them from, you could rate people from 1 to 10, and so we launched that. I think so. So we had the idea one day, and then. Jim built it over that course of that week.
So it took a week to build, like what Naval would say is your MVP?
I don't even think it took a week. I think it took him like a couple of days, but he was doing other stuff too. It wasn't really meant to be a serious project at the time. It was just kind of fooling around. So I think that was on a Monday we had the idea, and then he'd send something to me like Friday or Saturday. I was playing with it at home, and then I think we launched it on the following Monday or something like that. So it was about a week from the idea to launching something. And we launched it pretty simply. We just sent I sent an email to 40 of my friends and just said, hey, here's a link to my picture, please be nice or something like that. And so I remember I sent that like at 2 o'clock, and this was before Twitter and all that stuff. So everything was still viral via email, maybe IM. So I can only imagine it would have been like if it had been during Twitter or social networks, but So we launched it. I sent that email out in the afternoon around 2, and I think we had about 35,000 people come to the site that day, and then it just kept growing from there to where it was. We just got a ton of press, and it was getting passed around like crazy. And I remember like we hit almost 2 million page views a day within 8 days. So. It grew pretty fast, and
it's like almost like serendipity-ish. Like it just
it was. I mean, it was pretty much a fluke. We had this idea. We thought it would be. We thought it could be popular, but we had no idea that it would take off that much. And like Jim and I had always had this goal of we always wanted to build something viral, and
like Hotmail?
Like Hotmail. And actually, the thing I was obsessed with was the Turkish stud. I don't know if you remember this guy named Mahir, but he had all these pictures online, and someone else took all his pictures and made a website out of it that was kind of a joke website. And then there was like this flash video where he was like, he would say, "I kiss you," and that was a catchphrase. And it was like, and it was really goofy.
So you were just doing it for fun, like to get a viral thing going.
Yeah. We basically, we just wanted to do something we thought could get big and see if we could do it. And that it seemed like a pretty appealing idea at the time. And so we said, we should build it. And so Jim built it, and then it took off very quickly, and then it became much more of a. Then it was really cool initially, and then the reality set in where it's like, oh my god, like how are we going to host this thing?
Yeah,
servers and
it's funny. Like everybody I'm talking to, it was different then, right? There was no Amazon services. I mean, it was like
really so difficult. At the time, this was 2000.
Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I mean, at the time it was, this was 2000, so bandwidth was about $1,000 a megabit per second, and today it's like, I've heard like less than $1 in some cases. So cost structure was really different, and we, machines were a lot more expensive, and there was no EC2 or anything like that, cloud-based services or anything like that. So it was really, we almost shut it down after the first couple of days. Because
wow, imagine.
The bandwidth was, we were basically running on borrowed resources, and we're just like, oh my god, we can't afford this. And it was like, I think Jim, I had calculated at some point, I was like, Jim, this thing's going to cost like $100,000 a month, and it's like doubling every whatever.
You're watching on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, literally every day it was doubling, and like, you know, I was in debt from grad school, and Jim was still a grad student, so we didn't really have the money. So we talked about shutting it down, but we had this one friend who was like, "If you shut that thing down, I'm going to kill you," because he's like, you know how hard it is to get this kind of attention, and
exactly.
Like, so we're like, okay, we should run with it.
So you didn't have you didn't have anybody you were like modeling after. You guys just did something randomly, like lightning in a bottle, right? It was just a little bit of luck.
Oh, it was a lot of luck. A lot of it was just the fact that you know, Jim and I watched Blind Date every day at midnight, like on TV, and like I watched MTV. I watched MTV a lot, and I watched a lot of Jerry Springer at the time, and you know, so you know, it's kind of like it was one of the first web applications that people kind of drew parallels to reality television.
Well, I can tell you, like, you're actually a pretty special guest for me to have on the show. One of the early guests. I told you, I copied your site. A lot of people copied your site. Right? And I did RATEorDATE.
Yeah.
I don't think you guys were doing the Meet Me thing at the time, so I did the RATEorDATE, and I sold it to MatchNet, which owned American Singles and JDate.
Right.
And it really got me into this industry, like doing this now for a living,
Awesome.
right? Because I was like, well, dude, if I could sell that website, I could just start another website and do that again, and do it again, and do it again. Right? So, but you inspired a whole bunch of other people too. So
yeah, we got. I mean, there are a lot of. I mean, it's funny. Like one of my best friends, Philip Kaplan, or Pud, who did Fuck Company at the time. He built the ripoff of HOTorNOT, and you know, Mark Zuckerberg built one, and you know, a derivative site. And you know, the YouTube guys started off with an idea around HOTorNOT too. So yeah, I mean, like that. It's been, you know, but I think that's not really testament to the idea itself as much as just like the concept of like people putting out content for other people to look at. You know, up to that point, people really, I would say we were one of the first applications where people put up their pictures for other people to look at, as opposed to like for strangers to look at as a discovery tool. As opposed
you like broke a model, right? You killed the subscription.
Yeah, up to that point, it was all Ophoto and Shutterfly. They were just getting started, and so this concept of like voyeurism and exhibitionism, or public profiles, really is what it was.
Yeah, you're right. Like Face the Jury. Do you remember that site? Like there was like a bunch of that kind of stuff. Remember FaceTheJury.com? It was
I mean,
Rate My Body. You know, Mike,
yeah.
right?
I mean, those were all
derivatives. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it was basically. We got
made a lot of people money.
What's that?
You made a lot of people money.
Yeah, actually, and Badoo also. You know Badoo? Those guys over there in the UK.
I don't remember that, no.
I mean, they're supposedly at like $1 billion market cap now, and like they started off as a HOTorNOT copycat.
Wait, who was it?
Badoo.
Okay, yeah.
BADO. So yeah, I mean, we didn't. It was just we struck on the nerve of the concept of like this public profile discovery. People, you know.
So you knew very early on, you actually had something here, right? I mean, your friends were telling you, you're crazy to shut it down. I mean, you knew.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as soon as it launched, we knew it was like, whoa, this is bigger, you know. And I mean, because the day we launched, the very day we launched, we started getting interviewed by, you know, like Salon.com found us the day we launched. And then, you know, within a week, we were in every major European paper. And then within 2 weeks, we were in every major U.S. paper, and then within two months we were in People magazine, and we were on Entertainment Weekly's It List and all this kind of stuff. So
right?
it happened fast. What's that?
And then you're like, so how are we going to make money doing this? Put ads up. That was the idea.
You know, I mean, it's funny. Like in the beginning, we weren't really trying to make money. It was still to us just something really big. That our goal was, if it could even break even. Right. It would be a success, because at that time, like, we didn't know that we would be able to make any money off of it. It was just like,
were you afraid like this is going to die at some point? Like,
oh yeah,
process?
Absolutely. I mean,
I've always felt like that with internet businesses.
Well, I mean, even before it would die from a conceptual, like from a user demand perspective, dying from a cost structure basis was actually a bigger. Yeah, I mean, so the very first thing we did, we did a few things in the beginning that really helped us. Get past that. You know, we cut a deal with Ophoto where we said, you know, people are coming in with cameras, and you know, it's like, well, if you know, we weren't hosting the photos. That's the first thing we did. Is we started telling people, put your photo on Yahoo GeoCities, and we'll just use it from there, right? Like we'll just put the image refer URL to point to your GeoCity. So in the beginning it give us the URL of your picture because we're
But
not
still,
hosting.
I mean, just the massive traffic and the CPU usage on the servers, right?
Oh yeah. Just I mean, yeah. So we launched that site on a machine I got for free for opening up an E-Trade account. So it was like a bare bones system. And I remember the very first day, or for the first couple of days, when you voted, it would take about 30 seconds before you would get the next page view, because it was just so loaded that it took that long.
And they still waited.
And people waited. Yeah, we found that people would like leave, and then they would come back to the window later and play over the course of a day.
That's what killed Friendster, right? I mean, it was like
they
call it the Friendster effect almost, right?
So what we did actually, so we cut a deal with Rackspace, where I basically called them up, a guy named Lou Mormon, who's still there actually, but he was a VP there even back then, and said, hey, you guys, you say that you're great because you help people scale. You have, you don't need upfront costs, and well, here's the deal. Like, we're blowing up like crazy. I'm going to be interviewed on CNET Radio or whatever, and and we're exactly that situation. Can you help us? And so they were really cool. They liked the application, and we basically cut a deal where they gave us free hosting for like a year.
Unbelievable.
And they said as many machines as you need. And I just remember that first week, every day.
I think I read that, and when I was running RATEorDATE, I tried contacting them. They were like, "No, we're not doing multiple ones."
Earned the path for you, right? Because they already had. We
already have these guys. We don't need two of these guys. And I was like, I got to sell this thing because I didn't know how to make money. It just kept getting more users.
And we were lucky, like we were lucky that we contacted them, and they were really cool guys. We're friends with them. We became good friends with them, and still friends with the founders. So anyway, so that was one of the things that really we lucked out on. It bought us time, but we still realized that it's funny. It's like we figured that this would be like a 6-month to 1-year project for us, and then we would need it to make enough money to pay its own bills, and then hire a person to run it, and then we would be done.
Right.
So early on, so we eliminated our cost and bought ourselves time by doing the Rackspace deal, and then we did a deal with OPhoto where we sent them people who had cameras to host the photo on OPhoto instead of GeoCities, and that was basically like a customer acquisition for them.
Right. Yeah.
But still, like the biggest problem for us was that ad rates were dropping at that time. I think CPMs were 5 cents, and they were still dropping, and so. That's when we had launched the dating site maybe 3 months after we launched the site, but we didn't start charging for it for another 2 or 3 months after that.
Okay.
And so once we turned on the payments on the dating side, then it quickly became apparent that it wasn't just going to make enough money to sustain itself, but it was it started ramping up really fast. So
yeah. So I remember seeing the website when I was in college, right? I graduated in 01, so I remember seeing the site when it first came out.
Yeah.
And then I remember back in like 2005, 2006, 2007, you guys never changed the site, right?
Yeah.
Like really, when you think about it, was that a strategy? It was like, I don't want to fuck up a good thing.
You know what it was? It was that. It's funny. Like I wonder if the site would work or survive these days, because design is such a it's. It's funny. Like Evan Williams. Evan Williams just tweeted or something like that. Something basically saying, back in the day, design was a positive thing. It got you differentiation, and today it's like a minimum bar.
Right. Got it. Yeah.
So it's not clear that it would take off the same way it did then. But in reality, what we figured with design was that we had a lot of users who were used to the design, and unless the design was going to add a lot of value, we would rather just put in new functionalities, weaving it into the existing design, rather than trying to get people to adjust to something new. So like when we added the dating service, instead of rating them from 1 to 10, it was do you want to meet this person, yes or no?
Yeah.
We basically kept the interface the exact same. It was just like we just changed what was in the box above the picture. So no, it was definitely intentional.
So design was always on the mind, right? Like you were thinking, I know that we don't have the most beautiful design, but it's working. Why fix what's not broke, right?
Yeah, it was like there are other lower hanging fruit to deal with, and then also on top of that, it was like, well, what's the design going to get us? Like, what is it for our own ego that we want to look cooler, or is it going to make, is it going to slow the site down? All these considerations. Our goal was really at the time to create the most efficient, what we thought was the most efficient dating marketplace or hookup site. Really is what it was.
Well, you
And
actually, did you say hookup site? There was an interesting, I remember reading somewhere you had an interesting, so something about the bar and a beer, and that's how you justified getting people to pay.
Yeah. So that was how our payment model worked. It was basically like we modeled it after a bar in dating, where most dating sites you have to pay. Most dating sites are like basically are like pimps and hoes, right? Because like if you can look at all the girls in the database, and then if you wanna like write any of them, you just pay the pimp, and it's like a flat rate whorehouse where like you just pay and then you can write anyone. But the problem with that was that a few things that we didn't like about it. One was that basically what ended up happening is that the good-looking girls would get flooded, and then they wouldn't write you back, and because there's too many to write back to, and then the guy just paid and then wrote a girl and then didn't get a response, so that's bad for him, So it just felt like a bad experience. So we basically built this system where it was like kind of like speed dating, where it's like you look at someone and then if they, it's like I go into a bar and I smile at a girl, and if she smiles back, that's like the green light for me to go and talk to her, and I can only talk to her after she's smiled back. Yeah. So basically, the girls aren't flooded or with letters from guys that they didn't already say yeah, okay. Right. And then at the end of the day, at that point, someone's got to buy drinks. So the idea was that one of you has to be a paid member, right? So and it's usually the guy, and that's how we model this. And the
girls were free, right? They could contact the guy for free.
As long as one person was paid.
And generally, it was the guy, right?
Generally, it was the guy, right? I mean, that's just like honestly, there was a correlation between how hot you were and how likely you paid if you were a girl, like on average.
That's not funny. You can't release those numbers, right? Because the girls out there that have those numbers will be like, "Hey, wait a second, I didn't swear."
But so that's how it worked, and we based the pricing on what we figured it would cost at the time for two beers at a bar somewhere in the Midwest. Right, and at the time, it was like $3 or something like that. We figured would get in the Midwest would get you beers.
Basically, got millions.
Today it would be a little higher.
So you got millions of people buying a beer, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Did you actually explain it that way on the website, or you just did the system and it worked that way?
We didn't explain it that way, but I mean, effectively. It was cheap enough that it could be an impulse buy, like it wasn't like $25. So, in fact, to be honest with you, in the very, very beginning of the system, for about 1 or 2 days, we did charge like $20 a month. Like we just blindly copied the dating sites, and then people were complaining about it, and that's when we kind of like sat down and thought about it, and then we said, why don't we innovate? Why don't we do something different, right? And because actually everything we did, we wanted it to be different from dating sites. So like we never called it a dating site.
Yeah, I mean that's where I made a mistake. RATEorDATE.
Well, we hit a different demographic. The reason that we thought that the dating system might work was because at the time Match and Yahoo were the big ones, and then there's of course American Singles and was also sizable, and all of those guys were kind of hitting like 25 and older demographic, like kind of like, okay, I want to get married or whatever. And all our users were like 18 or even 16.
They're hooking up,
they're hooking up. So we figured like, can we build a dating site for these people? And
there was also a stigma. Let's be honest, right? There was a stigma.
That's the point. There was a stigma, and so we said this thing can't look or feel in any way like a dating site. So that's why we wanted a different interface. That's why we had different pricing in the end. That's why you never saw us use the word dating. It was always meet me. Actually, it was funny. There was a little inside joke there, which was that the top of the name of the site was called, or the headline on the site when you went into the dating part was called "Meet Me at HOTorNOT."
Right.
And the joke was that the reason we wrote that was because meet me at, if you put the me and the at together, it becomes meat. So it was basically like a meat market. So that was a little inside joke there. But everything had to be different from a dating site. We never wanted to look like a dating site or feel like a dating. The interface was different, pricing was different, and I think we went through the P's, like product, pricing.
Right. I was going to ask you about like stuff like that. I mean, because today these startup founders that are, I mean, these are so. First of all, it's ridiculously crowded, right? It's really hard to start a scalable product like you did, right? At your time, it was just like kind of lightning in a bottle. I think I was fortunate and lucky to get in. I'm not even a developer, so the fact that I could hire developers to build things like music video codes when I did that one, and the things that I was lucky, right? It was just timing in the world. You got a guy that knows how to scale something, he knows the architecture of like how to do load balancing, and he knows how to build scalable code. You're not hiring him today, right? He's going to start his own thing, right? The world is different.
On average, but I think there are a lot of good people out there who will still work for work for food. You know what I mean? Like not everyone who has, like, let's say skill set and like drive / ambition, and also like, some people just have liabilities where they can't take that risk, right? I mean, that's really why everyone should do a startup when they're young, not when they're older and more experienced, because the reality is, as you get older, as you know, as we get older, you only accumulate liabilities, right? So when you're 20-something and you have no wife, no wife, no life, no money, no anything, like, but you have time. That's actually the hardest thing to commit, actually, is your time. And
as you get older, you just don't have the time.
You don't have the same focus, right? And so, like, or let me put it this way, you can have that focus if you have the money later where you can support all those liabilities without worrying about
house vacations, all kinds of things start happening.
Right? Well, but if you're like a billionaire, then you don't. That's fine, right? You can still devote your time to. So my point is that like the bottleneck, the limiting function is whether or not you can do it while you're young enough to accumulate those resources so you can do it the rest of your life.
That's exactly right.
If you don't do it when you're young, then, because everyone thinks, oh, like I'll go get a job at a big company, I'll learn a lot or whatever. Then they get basically roped into that life. They get used to having a salary. They get used to spending that salary.
No, there's no question. I have a lot of friends that are programmers that work for other companies, and they're like, at some point I'll start a company, and I'm like, dude, you just get another kid. It's like, I don't know when that's ever going to happen. At some point, you're not going to care,
It doesn't. It's not even. It's the kids in the mortgage are the obvious ones, but there are even smaller things that can like lifestyle. Like for instance, like so when we had our employees at HOTorNOT, they all wanted to be entrepreneurs, and I would tell them all the time, like, look, like we're giving you a lot of money. Don't spend it. Like, save this money. This is your nest egg, and don't increase your cost of living. Right? It's like, don't get used to having big screen TVs. Don't get the car. Don't get keep eating the ramen, because when you can never go back on lifestyle. It's very painful.
So true. It's so true.
Easy to slide. Right? It's like going back. Like, can you imagine like if I told you, okay, from now on, no more cell phone for you.
No sushi.
Go back. Yeah, right. Like, exactly. You can only eat. Okay, your budget for meals is now like $5, and it's like it's hard to go backwards, right? And so like when you're in college or whatever, it's like that's your normal. I'm like I look back. It's like when I lived in college, I spent nothing. Like I mean,
you lived off of like $2,000 for the whole year,
Right. Exactly. And so that's why you have to do it. The earlier you can do it, where you don't need anything else, the better off you are.
Yeah, you have a higher chance for success. But what you're saying about the P's, right? I mean, when I evaluate like a business, if I want to do an investment or if I want to start a new thing, I think about like certain things that I've learned over the years. These younger guys today, they are thinking about those things, right? So it's highly competitive. What I mean, like differentiation, can this thing scale? Will it be defensible?
Everything is about differentiating, right? I mean, like it's not just business; that's just life, right? Like you want to find
different, right?
you want to meet a girl, okay? Differentiate yourself somehow. Right? It's like you have to differentiate yourself from the crowd.
Differentiate or die, like the book.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's like peacocking, right? Have you read the game or the pickup artist stuff? Have you read? Yeah. So it's like that. It's like you got to peacock, right? So like with HOTorNOT, we paid a lot of attention to the P's. So like our product had to be different. The placement was different. Like we didn't advertise, and we at our price point we probably could not have advertised economically against the dating sites who were monetizing.
You mean for acquisition, right?
Yeah. Like where are we placing the product? How are we getting our users? Was different. Our product was different.
You were almost inherently viral, though. People would show their page to people.
Well, that was our difference, right? Like, so if you think of the dating site as being the competitive site with those guys, our rating site.
They were hiding behind the walled garden. I don't want people to know I'm on Match.com.
Right. Well, yeah. But whereas with HOTorNOt, the rating side, mind you, I mean, most of the people who went to HOTorNOt never really realized there was a dating site too.
That's true.
But so it really grew its reputation on the rating.
What percent ended up paying? What would that converted over?
Okay, if you created an account on our system, it was by the end it was about an 18% conversion rate.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that was.
I mean, most subscriptions, right? Like 2 to.
So I think if you were a man, there was like a 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 chance,
That's
and if you were a woman, there's 1 in 10 chance or something like that.
I probably paid.
I mean, it's funny.
I saw a hot girl, was so compelled and just wanted to message her, right? I mean.
I mean, that's what it was, right? It was basically an impulse buy. It's like, okay, here's this cute girl. You said yes to her. She said yes to you.
Right. It was very, yeah.
It's very different. Like, so the Match.coms and the traditional dating sites basically wanted you to pay up front.
Right.
And then at that point,
desperate.
And at that point, like, if you never got written back, so what? Their strategy for that was, okay, well, then we should try to charge for 3-month packages up front.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I do remember paying one time. I do remember paying on your site one time because I rated a bunch of different people. I found the Match Me feature. I was young at the time. My wife is watching, and and I was clicking on the Match Me thing, and I got a bunch of these yeses back. And I said, I guess I'm not that bad looking. Okay, that's cool. I don't know what happened. Yeah. And then I must have paid because I do remember messaging with somebody. And the only way you do that is if you pay.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the girl paid.
But we didn't. Yeah, exactly. And so, so most sites were trying to get you to, because they just wanted you to pay, and then they didn't necessarily expect you to stick around.
Right.
They really tried hard to get you into the longer duration membership.
They're trying to get you for a lifetime value or something.
Our philosophy was, if our marketplace isn't working, then we don't deserve the money. And if it works, and people will, and a lot of our users just paid, and then they would stop, and then they would pay later again. They come in and out of the system, especially because it was based around, a lot of it was around hookups. So it was,
next girl, joke, the only way I get to her is if I pay.
Right. But the joke was, if eHarmony is successful, you'll pay them once. If we're successful, you'll pay us over and over and over again.
Right. That's great.
Yeah. So
just keep coming back. Do you remember when you guys hit the first 1 million members? Was that your first year?
Yeah, I don't even remember. Gosh, I don't really remember.
What about on revenues? When you hit $1 million in revenue, what was a big milestone that you guys were like, wow, I just can't believe this?
Well, I mean, the big milestone was when we turned on pricing.
Right.
Because we went from basically barely making enough to cover the server costs if we had to pay, rack space, to I think almost instantly it was $500,000 a year. At the very, very beginning point, it was $500,000 a year.
Wow. So you were and you didn't even tell Rackspace. You're yeah, we can't figure it out yet.
No. They were cool with it. I mean, they wanted us to be successful, right? Because then we could pay them in year 2, right?
That's true. That's right. Yeah.
But
make your money.
No, they were cool with it. I mean,
so that was all profit then your first year. That's awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, we never even hired anyone until year 3.
Yeah.
At which point, I think it was doing $4 million a year, and it was just Jim and I were running it out of the house. And
there was what are the server percentage-wise? 90% profit or something?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So our net margin was 93%, I think. I mean, it's servers and legal costs, just cease and desist or whatever.
For the images that may have come up or something like that.
No, we were sending cease and desists.
Oh, but you also embraced some of the copycats. I remember seeing a list on the site.
Oh, yeah. We did not have a problem with people copying the concept.
Oh, okay.
We did have a problem with people copying our brand name or trying to
something hot or not or whatever.
We didn't send cease and desist to. It wasn't the little guys that were copying us. I mean, everyone who was like us that was copying us wants to build their own version better. They were all making it, some other name. Right? It was
they were rating cats and dogs, all different those things.
AOL was copying it. Or Paramount,
really?
AOL,
Okay.
Yahoo. So we were basically sending cease and desist to big guys, not to small guys, because only the big guys would copy.
You're right. Everybody started using that HOTorNOT. Even mass media was saying, "Is it hot or not?" I remember seeing that.
Yeah, actually, there was a tool I found once where it gave you I think it was on Google, where it gave you a count of phrases in the news, or you could count. It would give you word counts, and I know that. Before we started the site, HOTorNOT, it was not really a common phrase the way it became.
Yeah.
And it's even today, I'll still see it used on ESPN or whatever.
Occasionally, yeah.
Yeah, so...
and that's 11 years later, and
it's not like we invented it, though. I mean, we didn't invent rhyming, but I do think that we popularized the phrase a bit and helped it, but,
what about Rate My Face? I've read something on the Wikipedia page when I was leading up to this. Okay. I wanted to read a little bit about you. What happened with that? What was that?
Well, with Rate My Face, nothing happened with Rate My Face.
You bought that?
No. That you're talking about Am I Hot?
Oh, is it Am I Hot? Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, I misunderstood. Okay.
Yeah. So what happened is when we launched the site, we had a bunch of when we came up with the site, we had a bunch of different ideas for names, and I think the first name, it was going to be called canyoutakeit.net or something really horrible.
That may not have evolved the same way.
Yeah, and then we came up with Am I Hot or Not?
That was the original domain?
Yeah, that was the original domain, Am I Hot or Not? And we looked at Am I Hot, and we looked at Hot or Not. Both were taken, but there was nothing on them.
Oh, I see.
And so we launched it as Am I Hot or Not? And then we were on Stern, or Stern was talking about it within 3 days. And then on the 5th day, or so, like a day or two after Stern talked about it,
Am
pops up, right? And so, and then they sent us a cease and desist because they had the domain, before we got Am I Hot or Not?
So bad.
And we're like, we checked the site, we didn't see anything there, and we looked on. I don't know if at the time archive.org didn't exist, but later it did, and we looked back and they had been crawling, and we didn't see anything there. So, but in the end, basically, you can draw your own conclusions. They claimed that we must have checked on the day they were moving the servers, right, or something like that. I'm like, well, why would you take the site down? You wouldn't take the site down if you were moving the servers. You'd get a new server.
If you know what you're doing, you wouldn't.
Yeah. So anyway, so we cut a deal with we actually thought that we would blow this thing up and then sell it pretty fast, and so we wanted to keep it clean from a legal perspective. Right. So we said, okay, fine. We're just going to change. We struck a deal with Am I Hot, where they said, look, you guys be Am I Hot, we'll be Hot or Not, and that'll be that.
Did you have to give them any money for that?
No. We didn't give them any.
Really? It was just like a...
the thing is, they thought that... I talked to someone later who worked for them at the time, who was like their intern, and apparently they thought that they were screwing us and that they got the good end of the stick. Because they thought Am I Hot was a much better name than Hot or Not.
That sucks.
Whereas it's kind of funny because
taken like 1% or whatever.
So we ended up buying them for. They called us like 3 years later and wanted to sell to us, and we offered them.
So they had some decent traffic, I guess.
No. Honestly, we bought them just to like put the stake in the heart and victory. It was more of an emotional, like, hey, you want to buy them, and like we won kind of thing. So. That's kind of why we did it.
That's funny.
But it's funny. I mean, the guy who ran it was a kid at MIT. He was a smart kid. He was a good guy. We liked him. We didn't have any problems with him. But I think he went off and he was like a really smart coder. So it's cool.
Do you know if he ever started anything ever again?
I think he did, but I lost track of him. Okay. But I wouldn't be surprised if he did something good. He was a smart guy. But I do say that, like, so he was a coder. His dad, who was like in LA, he ran like a post processing video studio. His dad was more of like a LA type. Yeah. And I think that's probably where, like, hey, let's send a cease and desist and all this kind of stuff came, because the son seemed like a pretty he's like a coder. Seemed like he wouldn't do that kind of stuff. So
how do you evolve, like, as an entrepreneur, right? Because you come out of business school, but they don't teach you they really don't teach you entrepreneurship right there. So I mean, how did you just learn this through trial and error? Did you have advisors?
First of all, I don't really position myself as an MBA, even though I have one, because I really went for 2 years of drinking. And that's what I got. I mean, I had an engineering background before that, and I grew up playing with computers and stuff like that. So, but independent of coding. Yeah. I don't really think when you speak about entrepreneurship, I don't think being a good coder or being a good MBA, I don't think either of those things really trains you for it. I mean, it's really like, are you good at chess, or do you?
It's like Risk, right?
It's a street fight, right? It's not like, I mean, like business. It's about survival. It's about outthinking people. It's about acting faster than them, spotting opportunities. This is like more like, are you clever? Are you fast? Are you agile? Like, this is not like...
It's a different type of intelligence, right?
Yeah, it's a totally different type of thing. And you don't have to... Like, to have vision, or, like Steve Jobs, he never really coded that much. Right. And he wasn't doing the circuitry that much, Like, he was probably like me, like, enough to, like, to get electrocuted or something like that, It's like... But, he wasn't really, like, the brains behind that. But, he had the vision and he had the drive push things and whatever, and he did a lot of the negotiation and stuff like that.
Sure.
I mean, I think any good company will have a blend of basically all the skills it needs to have and not much more. So like your small team can do everything, But
I mean, there's one part I would say just in running companies. I mean, and then you guys went through this, right? The legal side of running a business and the accounting side of the business is just the part that I think that most entrepreneurs aren't ready for. And it's like you kind of have to somehow figure that out along the way. How did you guys do that?
You just figure it out along the way. I mean,
yeah, but like, I mean, let me rephrase the question. I guess that's not the fun part of the business, right? And at some point, you're like, do I really want to do this? Like, this isn't fun, you know?
Yeah, it depends on what, you know. Like, I mean, I think I don't see whether it's coding or the business side. I don't see it as one side being funner than the other. I just see it as like everything's a puzzle. You know, like, and you got to figure out the puzzle. You got to learn what the puzzle is about. You got to figure out what other people are doing. You got to figure out if you need to figure out your own solution, you know, and then build that. So, you know, it's like, it's really just like, can you think, you know, are you thinking on your toes to solve any problem, right? That comes your way. Like whether it's a technical problem, which we had, or it was like, you know, how are we going to deal with payments or chargebacks or whatever? You know, like
it's just as it's coming constantly.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that any fast-growing business where they tell you everything was planned from the beginning, or that they had a vision of it in the beginning of how it ended up, is lying. Right. Because it's just like you're just like you know, you might have a sense that you want to move in a certain direction, but everything's, you know, you're dealing with things that are popping up, and you know, you're just dealing with them and trying to make choices along the way that you think position you to keep moving forward, right?
Yeah, it's like if somebody told you Zuckerberg was sitting in his dorm room thinking about the platform, come on, right?
Oh, no. Yeah, exactly. He wasn't at the time.
He's like, I was building HOTorNOT, just a little bit different.
But yes and no. Okay, so here's the thing. I don't think he was thinking about the platform.
As it is.
But it's not impossible that he had thoughts about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, he could see, I mean, like, so he really started at the same time a lot of us were looking at that, like right after Friendster, right? Yeah. And everyone's like, why is everyone so excited about Friendster? And then, I mean, if there were a lot of people actually who were like, you know, you could become single sign-on. The concept of newsfeed was not like, I mean, other people had been talking about it as well.
Trying iterative types of it.
Being an application platform, also not a idea that was not getting passed around. I mean, people had these ideas. It wasn't that he.
I mean, look, MySpace was an app platform. They just didn't formalize it, right? And they didn't embrace it.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that
widgets, they called it.
No, they were an app platform in that they allowed freeform embeds.
Right.
In the beginning, and actually they stopped it and really hurt them too, actually. But yeah, I mean, YouTube basically was built on MySpace.
Yep.
YouTube was built on MySpace and Saturday Night Live.
Absolutely. And I was going to talk about tipping point with you, but you had your tipping point just by your first 40 minutes.
Yeah, our tipping point was like pretty much instant. But you know, like the YouTube, like we were friends with Steve and Chad and those guys, and yeah, it was clear that I mean, they were like, everyone saw what happened with them. The tipping point was the embed. It was the content that was illegal. That, you know, that was also why people were afraid of YouTube too, right? In terms of like,
dude, I got put out of business. I know.
Right, exactly. And you know what? YouTube
got partners put me out of business. Universal.
Yeah. So, but you know, but then they saw it as a challenge to scale. I mean, they were so busy trying to scale up that it didn't even.
I give them so much credit, dude. They never had no downtime that I ever seen. Yeah, it was amazing.
Oh yeah, they were good. They were good.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, so. Anyway, so going back to, you know, Zuckerberg and thinking about all those, I think in the back of your head you have these ideas of what you can do with it, and those ideas are always out there.
Yeah.
And as you make your decisions along the way, you try to figure out ways that can kind of guide your user base towards those ideas step by step, slowly. It's like, you know, in the beginning, Facebook was nothing more than Friendster, in that it was people looking at people. For connecting to people for the sake of it and communicating with them, and really looking at pictures and looking at pictures of your friends' friends, and basically like looking for the hot girls or something like that, right? And then they added the news feed, which remember at the time was really controversial.
Yep.
But it made it even more of a communication tool with your friends. Made it more about the status message, and you know,
which is like really instant messaging AIM buddy list thing.
I mean, like so I would say that, like, I don't think they had, like, I don't know this for a fact, but maybe 5 years or 6, 7 years ago, he probably had ideas of how it could end up there, but he didn't have a plan.
Right.
But along the way, they would do things that, it's like, oh, and then
so let's talk about like HOTorNOT relative to that, right? Because you were there before him. You had massive traction. We've talked about this before. You guys tried to figure out, I guess, along the way, how come you didn't evolve to become? It seemed natural. I mean, the guys who started Facebook, the guys who started YouTube, I copied you. A lot of other people copied you.
Yeah.
You guys always remained the same. I get where you're milking the cash cow, which was smart, right?
Yeah. Well, I would say this. I mean, in retrospect, you could argue it was a mistake. That we did have those opportunities and we missed.
It could have been $1 billion thing,
I would say that the decision on how we were going to run HOTorNOT was made in a different time, than when all those companies came out. So when we started, there was no AdSense. There was no way you could survive your costs without charging and so on. And those guys, by the time those guys came out, we'll stick some AdSense here or there or whatever, or, the economy had come back, so there was more people willing to take risks on angeling and stuff like that. So, at the time when we started our company, we were inherently much more risk averse. And we said, once we figure out the cash cow, it's okay, let's try and milk this cash cow, right? Yeah. We did have some aspirations of doing broader things. Before Steve started YouTube and before he worked at Facebook for a while, he and this other guy, Mike Solomon, when they were at PayPal still, were going to join us to start a social networking site, and the first application was going to be media sharing, right? And so, but we didn't do it. And, the mentality that we had was probably more risk averse on investing, reinvesting, and going for broke. At the time, we weren't rich in any way. We were in debt and poor.
You were getting there though, right? That was like what year was that in?
What year did we launch?
Around the time with Steve?
That was around 2003.
Okay, all right. But you're making good money.
Look, it was like I said, it was a mistake in retrospect, but at the same time, it's like, well, you can't always look back at the decisions you made before and say, well,
it's not like a regret,
but I know I should have done it differently. Like, of course you should have done it differently. Like, it's like, I should have played the lottery last week and played these numbers, right? Like, it's okay. The way that we saw HOTorNOT, and keep in mind, we didn't really ever think HOTorNOT was ever going to get as big as it did. And frankly, it was, so we basically always saw it as stepping stone.
So are you friends with Russ Fradin, the Adify founder?
Yeah, I know Russ.
Yeah, Russ had a conversation with me. Naval had a conversation. We had two kind of pivotal conversations when running the ad network, and they came to me. And I think people who are trying to maybe raise money for their venture, if they're making money in their business like we were in our ad network, right. Russ is like, dude, what are you trying to do? What are your personal goals? Like, what do you want to do?
That's really what it boils down to. So everyone makes a presumption that everyone wants to be a billionaire and like everyone has the same goals. So when I talk to entrepreneurs, it's always like, well, what is your goal? Like, forget the company's goal, forget the investor's goal. What is your goal? Right. What do you want to get out of this? Like, because you're sacrificing your most scarce resource, your time.
Yeah.
Because we all die, right? So what are you trying to get out of this? You're not trying to live your life for other people. What are you trying to get out of it and then get it, right? And so with HOTorNOT, we really saw it as a cash cow, and we milked it. Now we did have some thoughts about turning it into an incubator. That's when we were talking to Steve Chen about joining. And so the one piece of advice I would give is this: we had a guy who we brought in as to help us, and he was our chairman. We brought him in very early on, and he was really well suited for us for that initial stage of the company. And we thought he would be very useful up until we would sell the company. But he came from a different background than we did and had a different mentality. And I would say that his vision and our visions did not necessarily mesh, and that also impacted our ability to reinvest and launch these random things,
right.
and start this incubator. And so I would say one piece of advice I would give is that make sure that the people you bring in for the long run have the exact same vision as you do from the very beginning.
Is that why you guys didn't raise the VC funding? Because you realized we want to milk this thing. We're not going to.
No, we didn't need to raise the VC funding. I mean, we were profiting, more money
Arguably, then you might make on an exit.
Yeah. Well, then we would need at least for a Series A.
Yeah.
For any big idea, right? I mean,
right.
So I mean, I think at the max year we made like $6 million or something like that. So that's enough to fund something, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
But but it turned out that like we had different visions, and that created conflict. And then in the long run, we backed down, Jim and I, on some of these ideas that actually, in retrospect, if we had done them, like we would maybe we would still be in that company and we would have done YouTube or whatever. All these kinds of you'd have a full incubator or whatever.
You may have some piece
maybe,
of YouTube,
but maybe you would have failed, right? But like you never know. But I would say this: the problem is that we'll never know, right? So I would say be very careful when you bring people in to make sure it's not that the person that we brought in wasn't smart or wasn't a good board member in general to have,
right?
And he's a good guy, and I like him personally. It's just a matter of fit, right? Like so again, what were our original goals? We should have, because Jim and I had the idea of being this utopian incubator, engineers utopia type thing where we have funding from this thing that makes money, and we can give better benefits in Google or whatever. But we brought in people that didn't align along our original vision, and I think that probably affected it. And but again,
but
who knows?
You also told me one time, right?
Maybe we wouldn't have gotten to where we gotten. So it's everything is in retrospect.
Cause and effect.
Right.
Yeah. You told me at one point when you were still running it before you sold it, you had said like you guys are for a while you checked out. It was like you had people running it. You weren't even doing anything, right?
Yeah.
And then you came back to the business.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a function of Jim and I, my co-founder, are. We wanted to do this incubator because as a function of us,
right?
As a function of the fact that we have low attention spans, short attention spans, but we like building new stuff.
Yeah,
and
you like to start.
Yeah, and so exactly, and so at some point, 3 or 4 years in, when we basically came to the conclusion that we were not going to become an incubator, then it became just about running HOTorNOT.
That's not fun.
You didn't give a shit anymore, right? I mean,
right.
honestly,
it's doing what it's doing and it's making money, right? Like,
yeah, we basically, in retrospect, both lost interest at the point where it was just making money. But we were done with the product. It was like we solved that puzzle, and like maybe that puzzle could have been made into a puzzle 10 times bigger or something like that. But we just didn't. We didn't really care.
I have to say, I just know like when you run in a cash cow, there was always like, at least for me, like you're like scared a little bit, like. What if I don't give this thing attention? Even though all the attention you give it, probably in your case, and I think most cases, it doesn't really matter, right? It just keeps going. But you think if I don't and I back off, what if it diminishes? I
mean, ideally what we would have done in retrospect is we would have found someone we really trusted, like absolutely trusted, and then let them run HOTorNOT as a cash cow. And then we would have launched another office completely and just taken the money from HOTorNOT and funded like an incubator, right? Because that's what we wanted to do, in terms of what our personal goals were, what we enjoy doing, and so on. And that's what our personalities were aligned with. We're not really operational guys. We're not optimizers. We were kooky guys who have ideas, and we
like Max, right? You're friends with Max. I mean, he's really analytical, right?
Yeah, Max is very analytical. I mean, we're analytical too, but it's just not what we enjoy doing.
Okay, right.
So, I mean, we used a lot of analytics to figure out what to grow along the way. But it's like when you're we need to spend some time pitting different, credit card authorization companies against each other, or different merchant bank account. When you're basically making optimizations that will increase the bottom line by 1%, it's who gives a shit, right?
Right. You're making so much money. Who really cares, right?
Whatever. Because and it's not that it's better or worse. It's just that that's our personalities, right? And that's what we're like. We just like doing stuff.
And it was great that you both have that personality, right?
Imagine Jim. And then I want to move on. You know what I mean? I don't want to spend a lot of time on any given thing, right? And so with HOTorNOT, once we figured out that we weren't going to be able to work on these other projects the way we wanted to, and turn it into this incubator, I think then it became just about HOTorNOT, and then it became a chore.
Right. You're stuck. You're married now to the business.
And then that's when I quit briefly, and Jim took over as CEO. That lasted about a year before he said, I can't take this anymore. So that's fine. Okay, we'll try to sell it. I came back in. Anyway, so like basically,
did you try to find a buyer?
What's that?
Did you shop to find a buyer, or did they find you?
We tried to shop it around the time that Friendster was getting shopped around, like 2006 or something like that, maybe 2005. But I don't think people really recognized. I mean, we were not a social network as people saw Friendster. Our product was insane, and basically everyone then was fixated on getting a Friendster or a MySpace at the subsequently
a community, right?
But we made the rounds. We talked to Viacom, Match, and IAC, and some others. But yeah, just didn't get the price that we.
How did you know what price you wanted to sell for? Was it a multiple of the years of earnings you knew you would make anyway? Is that how you kind of figured it out?
When we first did that first process and we hired a bank, we just kind of came up with a range and said, okay, fine, that'll do it. The second time, like when I eventually sold it off, I just called Jim and said, hey, how much money do you think you want for it? He gave me a number. I said, okay, and then I got it really fast because it was a low number. Because by that point in time, we were both so disengaged, we just kind of wanted out.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would have. If I had told my then girlfriend, now wife, that I would have given it away for free if I could find someone I trusted with it.
That can almost like if you own like a body shop, right? Usually one of your employees takes it over, and then you get like this earn out over time, right?
Right. Yeah. So that was one of our issues, is that like all of our employees we hired, because we kept it really lean, we hired people who we thought were like us and were entrepreneurial.
Right.
Well, they all basically wanted to go and start their own things, and so that became a problem for us because operational. When we sold the company, we sold it with one customer service / office admin and 2 engineering interns.
That's it?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's so the buyer, it was all about the money.
That's one of the reasons why they got a good deal.
It was like an accretive transaction for them. They were like, what are the numbers this time, that?
I think we were still doing like $5 million in earnings. So,
so they did a multiple or something, and then they just bought it.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like we sold a laundromat or something. You
didn't care though, because you milked the cash cow. Now, if you had raised money from like some angels and stuff, they'd be like, "Dude, what are you doing?" And
Right. I mean, honestly, what happened is that we saw what happened to Steve with YouTube, and we just saw how Bebo grew very quickly and sold. And we basically realized that if we were going to work on something that was going to be high growth and exciting, which is what we both wanted. We didn't really want these mature businesses that, in fact, HOTorNOT was a liability, because to try and turn that into to basically restart something and recreate it.
At one point you pivoted, right? You went to the advertising model and came back, I remember.
Yeah, and so basically that was the first attempt. That was an attempt to say, okay, let's try something new.
Right.
And then at some point I just realized,
screw it.
Yeah, heart's not in this. I'm wasting my time. Even if we pulled it off, it's like, do I really care about this anymore? Like, not really.
So okay, you're done with it. You guys sell it. Some company in Canada, is that what it was?
Yeah, to these guys that were rolling up a bunch of dating properties.
Who even knows what happened with that, right?
I mean, they're still running it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they also
they had investors, right? It wasn't like individuals who bought it, right? It was an investing group.
Yes.
So what is their goal when you think about, you don't care, right? You sold it, but I mean, I wonder what the goal is.
I care. Of course I care. I would over the years
Well, you don't want to see HOTorNOT die. I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly.
No. I get what you're saying, but what I'm saying is are they going to take it?
This way.
Is that what their goal was?
On the legacy issue, by the way, as far as I can tell, my strongest legacy may end up being the HOTorNOT mention in the social networking movie about Facebook. Because with the people who bought HOTorNOT, I think a few things happened. One is they had other properties that were also doing really well.
Did they own Ashley Madison?
Yes, which got them a lot of attention, continues to get them a lot of attention, and that's a massive cash cow. And so,
terrible, but
yes. But so their attention is focused on that, and then also I think the ethos of what HOTorNOT was built on, not being a dating site, not being that traditional.
The same today.
They basically. They were dating site guys, not anti-dating site guys. So they try to make it more like a dating site, and I think that has kind of crippled it a bit.
They should just go back to the roots.
Yeah, but I don't think they really care anymore, and it's it's fine.
The traffic has definitely dropped. I looked at the traffic before.
It has dropped. It has dropped. It's a little painful to see.
Yeah.
But as my friend as Max mentions, I just need to let go and move on. So I have.
It's your baby, though, right? That's your baby. I mean, you did that for 8 years.
Here's the thing. Like, I think when you're in the middle of a company, it is your baby, and but the thing is, at some point, you have to let it go. Even if you're raising your kids, at some point you got to let them go and do their own thing.
Yeah, right. I can't imagine doing that.
You can't feel responsible for it anymore, and I mean, everyone wants to feel that it's their legacy, but what does that even really mean? I mean, like
50 years from now, no one will remember any of this stuff, right?
You know what? In 300 years,
right?
So the companies we know won't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
So what does that mean, legacy? Right? It's just like I just want to focus on doing things that I think
you
are
got exactly what you needed to get out of that.
Yeah, I did.
Right.
But
along the way, you were an angel investor while you were still there, right? Because you invested. I just got off a call with Jameson, right? So you invested in Mochi.
Yeah, Mochi Media actually. So Jim and I were the first funders in Mochi Media, and
he told us a cool story about Hawaii.
Oh, he told you about Hawaii? Yeah. He used that house more than we did, actually. But it was a worthwhile investment. I started angeling around 2004, 2005.
Okay. Well, at that time, what was your average size that you were doing per company?
50,000.
Yeah. And how many did you do? How many investments did you do over that from
then to now?
I don't know if I want to say now because I want to ask you how successful they were, and you can't really determine what is now.
So actually, to address that, I cut my investments into 2 funds. So there was a definite breakpoint where I stopped for a while, and so in that time period, I did about 12 deals.
Okay.
And roughly 50,000.
Around that, sometimes a little more or less.
Yes, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, okay. But on average 50.
And did you figure out what's your ROI or what's your IRR? They should say, right?
It's interesting. Of the 12,
I mean, Mochi did really well.
Mochi did really well. Only 1 has died.
Okay.
And 10 are still going.
And one big exit or 2?
I'm sorry. No, that's not right. 1 has died. I've had 3 returns of capital.
Okay.
One of them was Odeo.
Oh, he gave your money back, right?
Yeah. Well, and I didn't give the money. I didn't reinvest it into Twitter. So
nobody did. Like Josh, none of you guys did, right?
I did. Yes, a bunch of us didn't. I don't know why the others didn't. I didn't because I had a product.
He offered you to do that, and you guys didn't do it.
Yeah, because so the thing is, I'm really old. I'm old friends with Evan. I was with him back when he was doing Blogger, and in the apartment coding by himself, broke, and I'd go buy him beers or whatever. And
I was a billionaire.
now, but whatever. He's the same guy now.
Yeah, I know.
So, so the thing is that I started working on a project that was similar to Twitter at the time, called Moods. It was not, so instead of what are you doing, it was how are you feeling, and I built it on Facebook, and I think we had 8 million installs.
You didn't want to have a conflict, okay?
I didn't want a conflict because Max had always told me about how he had a conflict with a friend once, and they didn't talk for 5 years, and I basically I try to live with a few basic, what's important to me, what's not, and my friendships I feel are more important to me than the money. So. Now, in retrospect, Evan at the time was like, I don't really think it conflicts. Even if it conflicts way down the road. And I'm like, I just don't want any risk of it, So I didn't end up putting in.
That's $2 billion companies, right? Multi-billion.
Yeah, there's more. Actually, I have a lot of. I have a YouTube.
It's funny because Reid Hoffman also told me he passed on YouTube. He incubated them in their office or something. And right?
So my sub stories are YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. I actually sent an email to Zuckerberg 2 weeks after he launched, asking if he wanted any help or any money or something. But I think he said he didn't recall getting it. He was too busy or something like that at the time.
You also had you gave him you referred one of his guys, one of the employees there.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin Colleran, who was their employee number 5, I think.
Yeah, so he's pretty rich.
I connected him to Parker and said, hey, you guys should hire this guy. Yeah. So I knew those guys pretty early on, and then there's another one, Xiaonei, which was the Facebook of China. I have a sob story there, and I actually tried to get Facebook to buy them early on, but that didn't work. But anyway, they went public, and they're I don't know how many billions as well. So Yeah, it's
but
not
overall angel investing, right? So it's easy you always miss the big ones, right? But everybody seems to tell these sob stories.
At least in my case, seems to be the case so far. But
right. You're like, I'm really great at identifying great relationships, and they're great people, but I don't invest in them.
Yeah, actually, so I would have a better track record if I only just invested in my friends.
Well, they say you should invest in people, not ideas. And
right.
You're like, no, I can't invest in these people because I know them too well.
Yeah, I know.
So
I need to get
know
rid of that.
really successful people.
Right, exactly. But so ROI on the investing. So that first fund, I think I have like eight still outstanding, and then 3 returned some money, either even or some money, and then I have 1 that failed. And it's already, I think the IRR right now is like 30%.
Okay.
So
when you say return, it wasn't like a return of capital. It was a return with a profit, you're saying?
In some cases, it was return of capital. In some cases, it was return with profit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just started doing it, recently. Started doing some angel investing, and I'm just asking some people about that because it's like.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, I've done. I think, as far as angels go, I've done pretty well. Like, so this first fund, it's returned, many millions, but. All you got to do is hit 1, right? And
it's the game, right?
Yeah, it is a game. But I think the thing to note is that angels, on average, did not make money, even back when angel rounds were done at 1 million pre,
right.
Or even 500,000 pre. Back in like 99, 2000, a lot of people lost their shirt.
Well, the pre is off the charts right now with these guys when I'm talking to them.
And so, unless you hit the big one,
yeah,
you are going to lose your money.
I think so. I mean, one of the companies was telling me the other day. I was like, "What's your pre-money?" He's like, $5 million, 2 guys in a co-working.
I mean, no, it goes higher than that. I mean, I know.
It's unbelievable.
Some go for 10 and stuff. So
they don't have massive traction like HOTorNOT did when you started. It's
yeah.
Like,
well, like there's been a shift in the thinking, because a lot of attention has been paid to various venture capital firms that have basically taken big bets and paid massive premiums at the time in order to get into the known winners, right? So here's the thing: like Excel got into Facebook,
right?
100, and Andreessen Horowitz will pay up the nose, and whatever.
They're just looking for a small return, basically.
Well, no, but here's the thing: they were investing in things that everyone kind of already knew were going to be huge.
Exactly.
Right.
I told you I bought a little bit of Facebook because I knew it was. You remember we were talking?
Right. Yeah. And yeah. But here's where here's the flaw, or not the flaw, but here's where the thinking has evolved. So people looked at those firms and said, okay, so clearly what it is you pay a premium to get in early, and you still win. Okay, forget the fact that those companies that they put into already saw massive traction.
Right.
Okay, so now everyone's just thinking, oh, it doesn't matter what valuation is, you just got to get in.
You got to win one, right?
Right, and
but it does because most exits
they've lost sight of the fact that their role models on that model were investing in things that were already kind of showing that they were doing well, right? And so basically, there's been this drift of this mentality down to Series A, where it's just an idea still, and people will get like $5 million. And
unbelievable.
It doesn't. It just seems to me like some minority of angel investors today will make money doing that just because they will hit the lottery.
Yep, it's luck. And
everyone else will lose their shirt.
Yeah. Do you have rules in investing beyond the evaluation? What are your rules?
I mean, I want to get back to working on stuff, and so I'm actually trying to ramp it down anyway.
Well, when you did do it, what were you thinking?
A lot of it was the team. Did I like the team? How smart? What was my just gut instinct on how smart they were? Like, can they adapt? It's kind of funny is like when all the valuations started going up, I did do quite a few investments in that space, and it's kind of the thing where like you knew it was a mistake, you were doing it, and you're watching yourself in slow motion, but you still ended up doing it. It's like, oh, what am I doing?
Also, I don't know about you, but you also have to. We talked about this a little bit. It's like, where do you put your money anyway, right? And you're just like, there's nowhere to put money.
Yeah. So that, interestingly, that's another conversation that I've had with Naval about why, a year or two ago, we had this conversation. Why are valuations going up so much? And I had this theory which he agreed with. I'm sure he thought of it himself as well, actually, but that a lot of it was quantitative easing. So the government
explain that. I'm not familiar.
So, the government is printing all this money, and interest rates are really low. So, where else are you going to put your money? Right? Like, the returns in the stock market have been not that great. I mean, if you put in risky. At the bottom, sure, but over a long period of time,
it's just risky, right?
But basically there was a flow of assets out of equities. Yields are getting lower because all this money was flowing to bonds. Like you can put into municipal bonds, but everyone's scared of them collapsing. Bank interests. I mean, even today, like you hear about, like a lot of private wealth people will tell you there's a lot of money just sitting in non-interest bearing cash.
I gotta be honest with you. I actually just have mine sitting in a savings account.
So do I.
Yeah, it just sits there.
Yeah, I do as well. In fact, I put it.
I was told, like, if there's a couple banks that's like they're not over leveraged, it's like safe to be.
Well, that's the thing. Like, so a lot of emphasis in the wealth space now is not on how to grow the wealth, but how to preserve it.
It's all about capital preservation.
What happens if your bank goes under? What happens if Greece defaults and then the European banks go under? And how do you think that these American banks have been over the past year? How have they been making up for the low interest rates? Where have they been finding yield? Well, they were going over to Europe. So, there are a lot of things that you can do. Like a lot of people go to treasuries,
right,
or go to treasury funds that return zero, just because you're looking for, it's equivalent of putting it under your mattress. In fact, yields got so low that I think there was one auction where people were paying the treasuries. There was a negative yield.
Right. No, that's right. That happened just 6 months ago, less than 6 months ago, right?
And so, so if you think about this, like you have all this cash and you feel bad because you're not deploying it in any way. And so when it starts along, it's like, okay, fine, I'll put a little into startup,
Yeah, you like the guy, you meet these kids, you like them, you think it's a really cool kind of idea, and you're like, you know what? Who knows? Maybe it works out. If not, me plus 5 or 10 other people did this, and he's going to go for his dream, and he'll figure something out. If it's not this one, I really just genuinely believe that.
Right.
Well, it's not just about the money when you're doing an angel investment. I don't think.
Right. A lot of people are. It's funny. Like I was reading comments where someone was like saying how everyone's an angel now, right? Like they're saying like it's like Twitter title equals quote day job and quote plus angel investor, right? Like everyone's an angel investor, right? Because and that's partially also what's driving up the price.
There's so much competition. Naval partially created that, right? Because of angel
investing. Well, I mean, he made everything more liquid, I would say. I don't know.
He helped the founders of these companies, which is great for the early stage guy, right? It's awesome. Yeah. Not so great for the investors.
Unless you get the one that is going to be the big one, right?
You never know, right?
And you'll be happy. But the main point is that I would say if you're going to angel invest, don't angel invest unless you don't. Like when I put in an investment, and I have a spreadsheet where I keep track of my finances and my my net worth and whatever. When I make an angel investment,
you don't use Mint?
No, I do use Mint for certain accounts, but like for tracking
everything.
Right. But my point is, when I make an investment, I basically treat it as gone. You know what I mean? Like
it's not in your net worth, right?
Yeah. Basically, exactly. I'm not counting in my net worth. It's like it's been deployed, and if it doesn't come back, that's actually my expectation.
It should be. Like they say, you burned your money, right? That's how you should think about it.
Well, I mean, I think there are going to be a lot of people who are going to really miss. There are some people who may be angeling money that they really don't feel they can lose. And
that's crazy.
It's just that like angel investing. Well,
I was going to say you really should only be investing money that you really don't need.
You have to be comfortable with where you are on the risk reward curve. Yeah, that's it, right? So, and I'm not sure if. It's hard to appreciate how risky startups are until you put into many of them and
you've run them. I mean, if you're like a banker or some guy working on Wall Street doing angel investing, and you haven't run like an early stage company like ours and know the risk. Like look at my last company. It's like got sued by Universal Music and put out of business. I mean, anything can happen, right?
Well, the thing is, if you're going to angel invest, you need to do at least 10 deals.
Yeah.
To make portfolio theory, right? And otherwise, it's very, very high risk on that one deal. Yep. So unless you're willing to, so how much are you willing to angel invest? Take however much you're willing to invest and divide it by 10, and that's like your maximum investment amount.
But like when you did it, right? Like you were running a cash cow. So it was like money's flowing in constantly. You're making lots of money, and you're like, so I don't need all of this money. So you throw some out. It's like maybe something works. If it doesn't, oh well,
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, we were. I wasn't putting all my money into it, and I carved out an allocation for that kind of activity.
Yeah.
And I was comfortable with taking pretty high risk with that amount, and it's high risk investment.
What was the first? I asked Jameson this, and he had a cool answer. I thought it was awesome. What was the first big purchase you made when you felt like you're comfortable? You made some good money. Well, he had a windfall. You didn't really have a windfall, right? You kind of earned it.
My account was just kind of like trickling upwards.
Yeah, right.
What was Jameson's answer?
He bought his mom and his grandma a house.
Yeah, right.
Which I think is like awesome, to do that.
Yeah, I didn't really, I didn't have any single purchase really, and I had a Porsche at one time, but I had a Boxster. It wasn't even like more expensive
one. That's like a 99 thing.
But I would just say that there was a time period where I was like traveling more, I was partying more. I
remember you did like the fly into space and come back down thing, right?
Oh yeah, I've done 0G type of thing, but that that I actually don't mind. I think everyone should do that at some point in their life if they can. I have no problem. I have no problem paying for experiences. I have more of a problem of paying for like physical goods,
like a Lamborghini or something.
Yeah, Lamborghini. You're just whatever car you get, you're just going to get used to it, and then it's not going to be as cool anymore. Then you're going to want something else or something better, right? You're going to want like a Ferrari. Yeah, you get used to it. It's just like life. Anything in life, you get used to it, right? So, and arguably, but the experiences, I feel like you retain forever in your mind. Well, hopefully, until you get
Do you believe in karma?
I do.
Yeah,
I do. Which is why I like talking to entrepreneurs, because when we started HOTorNOT, we didn't start it cold. We had a lot of friends who had done startups who helped us, gave us a lot of good advice, gave us some knowledge about how to set up load balancers, or a lot of what we did in the beginning is like, why did we buy our servers from Rackable Systems? Because Larry Page said he was buying from Rackable. Why did we buy this load balancer? Because Brad Fitzpatrick said he was buying this. I think F5 or I don't remember, but so we basically didn't have to do a lot of thinking because we could talk to people who had been through similar problems before and had come to conclusions, and we could save time by just going to them, right? And so yeah, I believe in karma. I believe in helping people when I can, because we got help, and there have been a lot of companies like Mochi Media and BitTorrent and even Odeo were all hosted in HOTorNOT's cage, because we had a ton of extra rack space and extra bandwidth. So I just believe that people should help friends whenever they can.
And not just friends too, right? I mean, it just extends on. What's
that? I think I believe it's good karma as well. I think.
So what drives you now? What's your motivation in life now?
I have family. Kids now. Yeah, so family is a new motivation. Work-wise, like I said, I want to stop angeling as much, and I want to start working on new stuff. I think for me, it's actually the same motivation as I've always had, which is I just want to build cool stuff.
Yeah, stuff that lots of people like.
I want to build cool stuff that people like and people use, and if I meet them, they'll be like, "Oh my God, I love whatever," and I think that's probably more satisfying to me than anything. So that's kind of what I crave. You could argue that that's ego in a way.
Why do you think it is this way in the tech space, and not just that, but just kind of in general, like the reciprocity, right? Like everybody kind of helps each other with nothing. Nobody really is expecting anything in return, and it's mostly on the West Coast, but it's kind of spreading, right? It's happening over here too. New York City, not so much, but it's starting to happen, right? It's like there's just transparency and this accessibility in our industry that I don't think you see in the music and the movie industry. And why do you think that is?
It could be this. Here's just a theory, but maybe it's because the world in the past, which was based more on physical goods and physical distribution, relied on basically would end up, if you built the topography, would end up a lot more centralized. You have various companies that are the central points of distribution. So whether you're a movie studio, all movies flow through these 3 or 4 studios, or you never make it, right?
Yeah.
Or for music, or for books, or for banking, anything, right? Like there's economies. Everything's based on the concept of economies of scale because it's physical, right? So one concept is that technology is much more intellectual property, or or whatnot, or it's virtual, you can have much more decentralized topography, where a lot of people can be successful. But now all of a sudden the nodes are not. It's not a few nodes that you have to basically suck up to and give 90% of what you make to them to make it. So now that it's centralized, well, a lot of these nodes, like the nodes that become popular in this new topography, is like, well, how did they make it? Well, in many cases, they might have gotten help from other people in the form of advice and whatnot. And
they just feel an obligation, right? To give
they
back.
feel an obligation, or they feel like, this guy's just like me when I was, 15 years ago or something like that. Now, that being said, the topography of the internet has quickly become more and more centralized over time. So it's not exactly a decentralized topography anymore, but there are opportunities everywhere. And so I just think there's going to be more of a community, and there's just more of a open, even open source software. There's just more of a spirit of people being willing to share. And
it's always been like anti-mainstream, essentially, the internet.
Well, actually, so if you think about what the internet is versus like why the internet is revolutionary for business and for people, it's because it's the first medium where people can scalably communicate from node to node, from peer to peer, as opposed to always going through a centralized source, right? So open source software couldn't really exist unless you had like a way to connect all these people who are willing to work on some idea, right? And so you end up with like communities on the net where they could aggregate, and then they would actually build things that could get traction, right? And that notion before computer networking really wasn't there. It really started off with Usenet groups and things like that, and evolved to groups, Google groups, e-groups, Yahoo groups, or and then CollabNet type things, and not only in the realm of technology, but just in general. So now that you're able to get people who are talking to other people, now you can now mobilize this energy.
Yeah. Oh, James, you froze?
I'm sorry?
Okay, you froze a little bit. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What you had asked a question? I didn't hear it.
No, I just said you froze a little bit. I was just saying to you, it's interesting because of that culture that was kind of like built the foundation early on. Because of that, it seems like the people that were successful early on, as what you're saying, it's like they gave back, and it's like it just seems like it's almost like you feel like it's attainable. Where in other industries, you see like a celebrity in the industry, like somebody who's a leader in your space. Maybe it's music, movies. In our industry, like you're attainable and you're accessible.
There's one other reason why that exists, specifically in this tech industry, which is if you think about the people who succeed, it's funny. It's like, I've met I know the founders of many of the largest internet companies out there, and myself and Jim included, and just like so many people who have built companies in my generation of web companies. We were all nerds who played with modems in 1985, right? And it's like, well, why is it like these people did well? It's like, well, they got this ethos that actually has thrived on the internet, or like why does Pierre Omidyar and Skoll think about community and reputations? It's like, well, this is stuff that like happened on BBSs back in the day, right? And we were all on modems,
it's
right?
all an evolution.
Yeah, and so here's the bottom line. If you have a successful web service serving millions and millions, if not hundreds of millions of people, well, you have a bunch of, what does that mean? You have a bunch of servers that are serving all these people with this code that's highly levered. But at the end of the day, you're still a nerd who, when you go out to dinner, on average, people still don't recognize you, right? I mean, like, and even if they recognize you, they're not like, it's not like LA where like if you're a celebrity, everyone's coming up asking for your autograph necessarily. In fact, people leave you alone still, right?
They just look at you.
Yeah, it's like, even yeah,
they like whisper to their wife, "Yo, that's not James Hong."
Let me put it this way. Like I've gone clubbing in LA with billionaire, and we didn't get in. Right? Like it doesn't. No one down there either cares, or they don't know, or who cares. That's the point. Like they're still nerds, right? Like we're all still kind of the same. Like we're not, and in say the actor celebrity's defense, it's like, if people were like.
But the funny thing is, James, right? They were the nerds in the drama club, right? How did they forgot their roots?
Yeah, but no. Here's the difference. They're the product.
They're the what?
They are the product.
Oh, that's a good point. You're right. No, you're absolutely right. Everybody knows who Twitter is. They don't know who Ev is, right? They don't know.
I mean, they might recognize him because they happen to catch him or Jack or Biz on
Charlie Rose.
On Charlie Rose or no, probably not Charlie Rose, but like on Kimmel or something, right?
Yeah.
But effectively, they're not the product, and so they're like a second order. They're
like Gary Vaynerchuk is the product, right? Gary made himself a product.
Right. Well, let me put it away. It's like, on average, if someone did recognize them, they wouldn't say, "Oh, that person is the Evan Williams."
I'll give you an example.
Oh, that guy is the founder of Twitter.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I remember I bumped into. I was in Oklahoma to go to a friend's wedding, right? And I was in this Oklahoma City or Oklahoma, whatever it was. And I walk past, I sit down, and he's like literally sitting over to the right of me. And it's Tim Ferriss. I never met this guy, but I follow him on Twitter. Mm-hmm. I'm a fan of 4 Hour Workweek, right? And I'm like, I think that's Tim Ferriss. Like, it was like one of those things. So I walk over to my wife, and because she's in the space, right? I said, you met Caitlin. I said, Kate, is that Tim Ferriss? Who's that? I was like, you don't know who Tim Ferriss is? So I was like, fuck. So I bring up my laptop on the Wi-Fi. I go, look, that's him. I go, she goes, go say hi. I go, that's kind of fucking weird. I'm not going to say hi. Right? Like, and he's, he's an author, for God's sakes, right?
So here's the thing, like with a celebrity, actual like a LA actor celebrity right, versus an internet celebrity, one, the pool of people who care are maybe 1 out of 100 in size. Yeah. And then of those people that care, like the ones that care enough to actually bother you are probably even lower.
It's like 1 in a million or 1 in 1,000.
Exactly. Like every now and then I'm sure like people do get like recognized and people come up to them and say, "Oh, I really love Facebook" or whatever, right?
Yeah, but they're not like, "Can I have your autograph?"
and like on average, none of these guys have paparazzi hanging out in front of their door.
Right.
Because frankly, the world just doesn't. I mean, there was some talk about.
By the way, that's one of the coolest things about it, right?
There was some talk about some Silicon Valley, like the people who made maybe The Real World or something like that wanted to make a show in Silicon Valley where they get people in a house and that work on a startup together and follow them around. I'm like, that would never work because these people have. First of all, we're not good looking enough for people to like tune in and like.
It's not the Housewives.
We're not good looking enough, and frankly, like. We're not partying that hard, right? Like compared to like what they're looking for, right? I mean, like it's like, oh, hey guys, like we're gonna have like people getting in a fight over like user interface design or something. And, like, no one gives a shit, right? Like in the like so.
That's a really good point. Yeah,
it would take some
self-serving to think they'll care.
I mean, I'll say it would take some really strong editing to make that a good show.
Yeah. Before we go, I play a little game. I've been doing it for the last few interviews. I want to see if you'll play. It's a word association. I throw a company name or a name of a person or something, and you just tell me the first thing that pops in your head.
Oh boy. Okay. Sure.
Okay. Facebook.
Cool.
Obama. That's what everyone's doing.
Yeah. Let me think
grunt
of the
or
word.
They sigh.
let me think of the word disappointed.
Yeah. Right. Google.
Scale.
Wall Street.
Corrupted.
Yes. Zynga.
What was the first one? I had a.
You said scale for Facebook.
The only thing I thought was Pinkus.
There you go, Mark. Right. Which is, by the way, an amazing story, right? That's just
yeah.
God,
it's funny. It's like all these guys have been around for a long time.
Yeah,
we know each other from a long before.
Like, who would I mean, you never know. You might have a future Zynga
support.
in your back pocket, right? You don't know.
Yeah, you never know.
That's what's amazing about it. It's like it's to me, it just keeps me dry. It keeps me going, right? It's like you just don't know. You can end up having something where like 100 million people are using your service at some point.
Right. I do know what the feeling I was feeling when you said Zynga.
Zynga, yeah.
Which was inflection point ? Where it's like either down or up, but they're at a very, very important
Jump
point.
the shark? You don't know.
We don't know. No, they're trying lots of smart things. So like, my point is, it's an important time for them right now. Yeah. Whether they make it or it's their time to make it or break it. I think right now.
What about Fox News?
Just conservative, too conservative.
There you go. Jason Calacanis.
Energetic.
Bill Clinton.
Charismatic.
DoubleClick.
Kevin Ryan.
Zuckerberg.
Smart.
And then our show, Behind the Web.
Inspirational.
Cool. The last question I ask is, you have a lot of things you could be doing right now. You didn't need to spend your time doing this. Why did you take the interview? Why'd you
like I said, I think it's when we were talking about karma, I think it's my success was a function of a lot of other people's efforts and a lot of other people's advice, and certainly I benefit from being in Silicon Valley, where you hear lots of stories, you meet lots of people, and you just kind of I think the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur is actually deciding to be an entrepreneur and sticking with it, because any level of success on average requires a lot of failure and basically a lot of perseverance. And I think the thing that's strongest about Silicon Valley is, in Silicon Valley in broader sense, not just geographically, but this tech sector, is the concept that people can continue to support you and be encouraging and give advice, even when things aren't going great. Because it's always darkest before you, mixing metaphors with what is it? It's always darkest before, calmest before the storm. In a positive way, whatever. But so I think it's important for people to tell their stories. In reality, I could tell people the exact things that we did from a business standpoint, but in reality, the only thing that I ever got out of people talking and hearing their stories was their stories, kind of knowing that, at some point, Bezos was scared, everyone went through the same thing. It's kind of like, it's like because entrepreneurship really is like a roller coaster, and, the highs are really high, the lows are really low. And, you kind of just need to know that, is it me? Like, am I a failure? Like, is this, it's like, no, other people went through the same, emotional, vortex that I'm going through, and it was okay for them. It's like, so yeah, exactly. So I think it's really important for people to tell stories, just so other people can kind of say, and he did it. I'm no smarter than a lot of people, and if I can do it, they can too, and they just have to kind of keep going and keep trying.
Dude, thank you so much. That's the perfect answer. I mean, it's exactly why I do this, because I just want people to hear it from you. Like, they see articles or whatever, they see edited down. This will be an unedited, clip, right? So it's not professional. It's very casual, right? You're in your house, right? You're just another person, and it's like there's somebody out there that's running some website. It's got 100,000 users, maybe 1 million, whatever it might be, right? Or it has nothing at this point. Or he's working a desk job at a cubicle, and he's like, I want to quit my job and do this, and it's like, you're right. It's just like, we're all in this together. If you're going to go for it, you're an entrepreneur. You're going to be an entrepreneur for life, because one of the things is once you join, it's like fear of failure. It's like drives you the most. You just don't want to quit.
Right. And also, in addition to the interviews you're doing, have you ever read Jessica Livingston's book, Founders at Work?
Oh, I have not.
Oh yeah, that's a good book. It's just like, it's bathroom reading where you can read stories. She interviewed a lot of different people. I'm in there, but I have no idea why, because there's like some amazing people in there. It's like Wozniak, Max Levchin, and me, right? I don't know why, but I think I was the entertainment value, actually. Like, I was like comedic.
You have good one-liners. If I had to cut you down, I could have good one-liners.
It's just good to whenever I want to feel good, I read that book, and I read this old book I have about the Peace Corps, where they have stories of Peace Corps people telling their stories. Both inspirational and kind of both like like when you read it, you're like, I can do this too.
I got to tell you, one of the books that kind of really inspired me, I think anybody who's an entrepreneur should probably read this, is Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. He just made things seem so simple. It's not so complicated, right? It's really not that hard.
Yeah, I haven't read that book, so I can't really speak to that.
You didn't read that book? That's crazy. I thought you would have read that. Yeah, it's so simple. He made and it's like I didn't go to business school or anything. He has this other book, Cash Flow Quadrants, and he talks about what cash flow was. And this is like early on, like right after college. I feel like that was my business school, reading his books and then talking to other people.
There's the business education. It's like the school of hard knocks. There's no better teacher.
Exactly.
Even if you're like a street hustler dealing coke or something like that, I don't know. Like, it's a business, right? Like they have strategies. They know which corner they want to be on because
That's
it's
right.
location, whatever. Distribution's
Make
better.
more than you spend.
I mean, like, yeah, there was actually an interesting. There was a book or a paper where I think it was a book where they basically talked about gangs and McDonald's, and they basically showed how parallel the infrastructure, how the organizations were almost parallel, like in like positions and like just how they recruit and like.
Well, they modeled. I don't know if it was like the Colombian drug cartel. Like one of them modeled after like GM or something like that. I read that somewhere where they modeled the entire structure of their business.
Well, fundamentally, every organization is just a bunch of people that you're trying to mobilize, right? So what's really that different?
Hey, again, thank you for sharing your story and coming on. I really appreciate it. Everybody else, thanks for watching.
Okay, see you later.